Articulate podcast, where if you know, you know, and if you don't, well, ask somebody who does. I'm the co-host Daniel, and this is my partner.
I'm Miles, and yeah, we're here to share some information that we hope is beneficial to not just us, but everyone else.
So before we get into our topic for the day, uh, we're going to kind of address where we sit politically and uh, kind of our base motivations of why we felt we had to do this and get involved in the scene that I, I personally didn't feel like ever joining the public scene. Discussing these.
Me neither. I've always been very cautious about getting my name out there. I think a lot of people are. Obviously, people can track everything you say and do anymore online, so I was always pretty skeptical. But I feel like I've reached that point in my life. I think you probably feel the same, where if you just stay quiet, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely not doing ourselves any favor by sitting on the sidelines, especially when it comes to this more ideological-driven politicization of what's going on in society right now.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing I had wanted to do was really ever broach this, right? It was always a thought in the back of my mind of, well, that looks kind of fun, but I don't want that backlash or.
That's how I felt.
But
yep.
I think that's the craziest thing right now today is people are being forced off the sidelines, and I think the last thing that you would want to do is to make the average person, your run-of-the-day male person, come off the sidelines and have to address topics of this nature.
Oh, this is exactly why I got into this sphere. I got rid of all my social media in the past just because I didn't want any part of it, the polarization. And this was, 8 years ago. It was bad then, and it has now reached that point. I can't sit on the sideline anymore. I don't think I'm alone in the way I feel. I think a lot of people out there, they just don't realize it, or maybe they do, and they're too scared to speak up about it.
Yeah. So let's get into kind of where you lean on the political scale. Just kind of give us a rough breakdown of where you sit.
So I'd like to consider myself as far as a libertarian I can go. For those that don't know what a libertarian is, it truly encompasses the idea of a self-governing individual to take full responsibility for right, for wrong, in all aspects of your life. There's no better way to put it than is self-responsibility. The freedom to do what you so choose, as long as you're done. I'll get into this at a later episode, but my philosophy on anything to do with life is, as long as you're not harming somebody's life, liberty, or pursuit of property, you should be at your free will to do that. There should be no laws governing against anything that prevents you from those.
Right. And I think a lot of people, maybe not a lot of people anymore. I don't know, honestly. But I would assume that there'd be a good number of people that can agree to what you said, right? And I'd consider myself more to be on a more conservative point of view, right? And when people think about conservatism, they honestly should think of it as not something that we want to stop progress, because that's not what conservatism is about, right?
No,
but it is about adhering to a certain morality and a certain tradition of where we came from as a nation, right? The morality of America is what made America great.
That's why people wanted to come here.
It's what made it probably. I mean, I can't say probably. It honestly is the greatest nation that's ever existed.
Yeah.
You can say that militaristically. You can say that economically, but even culturally, we've taken over the world when it came to just how overpowering everything has been about America. But I think conservatives really just want to say, like, we agree with that libertarian side of view, right? Where people have a certain personal responsibility. But we also say things along the lines of there are things that we should not change about the Constitution. There are things that we should still adhere to because the Constitution is the greatest thing that was ever written. It was the greatest thing that ever set up a government, and there shouldn't be any deviation from that, right? We should leave it as written and stop overriding it. We can make the amendments, but it has to be the right way.
Yeah.
And I think we've lost that as a nation, and I think we're seeing just this great demise right now of everything that America stood for.
And then, for those that, when they hear conservative, don't instantly think of Republican. For goodness sakes, don't think of straight Republicans.
Oh no.
We both agree and disagree on multiple things Republicans say, but also multiple things that the Democrats say. And don't try to confuse conservatism with republicanism, because it's completely different. And you'll find out, for listeners out there, you'll find out we don't always agree on everything. There's going to be topics that we do disagree on. And we hope to show that the way to fight or the way to have a disagreement with someone is not trying to fact check them, so to speak. That's not how we're going to go about this. But we will try to be factually based on everything we talk about. Obviously, our opinion is going to be in this. That's the whole point. Really, opinion is huge in every aspect of life. It's hard to find even a real fact in science anymore is.
But people need to remember that, right? An opinion is just that. It's an opinion.
Yes.
We'll try to be as factual as possible.
Yes.
If you fact check us and there's a clear error on our parts, we will always make a retraction or a correction. Because truth is always on the forefront. And it's not my truth or your truth. It's just the objective truth.
It is what it is, right? Yeah.
You'll never hear me say, "Well, this is my truth," because what does that even mean, right?
Yeah.
So
that's a good
I don't
point.
know what that means, and that's not something that we're gonna do here. We'll try to be as factual as possible, and if we make an error, we will definitely correct.
Yeah, and please do comment. Talk with us. We're more than happy. We enjoy conversations, real intellectual conversations with people. It's hard to find anymore, it would seem. So if you are out there, feel free to ask. We would absolutely love to have a conversation with you.
Just remember, respectful in the comment section. We always want to treat everybody with respect and just try to have this genuine and honest conversation with people.
Yes.
And that's all we care about.
That is what is so vital. It's almost like being on a team, right? Like I can almost consider America like a team. You have your football team, you have your offense and your defense, and right now you could say your offense is the Democrats or the defense is the Republicans, or vice versa. It doesn't matter who's who, right? And typically when they work together, they're going to have their disagreements on the practice field, right? They're going to, oh, you were holding, right? That's a penalty. We're gonna call that. But at the end of the day, they're going to fight together side by side. And right now, that's just gone out the window. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure there's multiple reasons, but that ability to work together at the end, disagreement, absolutely. Offense and defense are they're always going to disagree on certain plays.
Oh yeah.
But they work together. They're on the same team. We are.
At game time is when it matters.
We have to be, on the same team.
You can not like your teammate, but when it comes game time, you're going to turn to him and say, hey, you got my back, I got your back, let's go do this.
And that's kind of where America is right now. We're in a war. Let's be realistic here. We're in a battle. The world necessarily is in a war with each other for power, for money, for technology, for all of those things. And they're watching America just fight amongst themselves, and they're just kind of pushing us to the side at this point.
Well, we've become a joke, and just the general view of every other nation. I mean, we're cutting tail and running everywhere we go with no plans in place. It just seems as though we're.
Which I don't understand. And this is, I mean, obviously this is Afghanistan. This is all fresh in people. Well, it's not as fresh in people's minds as it should be.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. We'll get onto that soon too. But in the deal with Afghanistan, it does seem like there was no real plan in play. I mean, look at what our NATO partners, they were condescending to us. They were like, what are you doing? You cannot, you're the most powerful country in the world. We relied on you. And it seems like you guys just booked it. You closed the door, locked it. You locked it and you ran, you know? You left everybody there. I mean, what's your take on that?
It's definitely hard to digest, right? From being the strongest, most dominant nation in the world, right? Where we were all about tactics and being just superior in that aspect.
We're damn good at it.
To see us just slide out of a country like that with no forethought, it seems, put into a safer trade or to even extract just American civilians
that needed to be out,
right? Whatever happened to No Man Left Behind, right? Whatever happened to we don't leave anyone behind, and we did, and
there's still people.
There's still people there. You know what I said? Well, we're done on the military side. Now we have to be diplomatic. Well, how are you going to be diplomatic with a terrorist organization?
You don't
right?
You don't have an embassy over there anymore. You are literally asking a terrorist organization to help get your citizens out.
Let's be honest. We're not asking. We're paying them to let our civilians out. We're paying them to let these green card holders out, to let these special visa holders out. We're giving them money, right? Joe Biden clearly stated that we would give them aid. So we're buying them out, right? We're saying, hey, please don't do this. And if we have to, I guess we could slide you a couple pallets of cash.
And aid and all that. I mean, even in aid, it sounds like that country is just falling right back into shambles.
Well, there's no cohesive government.
Wasn't there, weren't they releasing like a statement saying the Afghan government is composed of this and this, and the countries that recognized it were like China, Russia,
Iran,
Pakistan. Yeah, there was a small handful there.
And that's what I was saying. I sent you that text about Afghanistan. They were going to use Taliban to uphold this war with India through Pakistan.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that odd?
It's not, though. I mean, if you look at the totality of the situation, they saw it coming. I mean, everybody had to know that the Taliban was going to take this over, that they were going to allow Al Qaeda to come back in, that you're going to have ISIS come back in.
There was reports of that phone call that was made between the former president of Afghanistan, I can't think of his name, and Joe Biden, and basically it sounded like Joe was like, hey, I know things are bad, you need to make it sound good. You need to make it sound better than what it is, you know?
Yeah,
which like, I understand. For those of you out here, we're both for, we wanted to get out of Afghanistan. At least I did.
Yeah, it was definitely, there's definitely a need for us to have left at this point in time. I mean, we were there for 20 years. We spent trillions of dollars that could have gone
far
to
too much
infrastructure or our military vets or anything else inside of America. So why we're here nation building other countries and spending money is beyond me.
Why are we not nation building here? I've heard a lot of people say that we're spending so much money, and then this is a whole other topic I'll get into later, but we send so much aid to foreign countries, which is okay, but we have, I mean, how many people homeless in our country? We have roads and bridges that are literally crumbling as people are driving under them, and yet we're sending billions of dollars of aids worldwide.
Can you say world police?
That's kind of what it is, right? The movie Team America, World Police. That's kind of what we were, and I absolutely hated it. I wish there had been. I get, we're setting a standard. We were, and there's a lot of good to that. But if our neighbor is hurting, why would we go overseas to help someone else instead of focusing on literally our own flesh and blood?
There is no answer to that. I mean, diplomatically, I can assume that we do it to further our own national security interests. Quotations, heavy quotations,
That's exactly
I guess.
what it is.
But
Which is just sad.
it's hilarious, right? We invade these nations and say, oh, this is national security. But
also,
the biggest national security threats has got to be China.
Yeah,
They're on the verge. They're on the verge of making moves on Taiwan, and
a slow play for decades. They've been working at it slowly but surely, just chipping away at the South China Sea.
It was our fault because we let them in economically, right? We said, hey, the only way to change them from a communist government is to include them in the global economic world, the realm, and so we brought them in. We said, hey, let's bring China in, and we'll use economics to turn them into a capitalist society, to turn that communist regime into something that was democratic.
Nation building.
But it didn't work.
In a different sense, yeah. It didn't work at all, no.
But here are, our greatest minds, and now have set up what is the next largest government, the next biggest security threat, the next militaristically threatening that we've seen.
And they're no longer afraid of us at all.
No. They're memeing on us.
Yeah.
They're talking about the Second Amendment, and they're laughing at it, right? Trying to sow these seeds of we need gun control.
Well, what was it? Report recently, it was either China or Russia was currently infiltrating, and I guess they've been doing this for a long time, for one reason or another. But they've been actively infiltrating our social media to push the dissent that is happening.
Well, they all do it.
Yeah.
Every nation does that, honestly. And I mean, the best way to avoid hot conflict, right, is by controlling the propaganda sphere, right?
You say the media?
Yeah, right. Being able to propagate disinformation is the best way of control. I'm just talking about this on a global national scale, right? If you want to avoid conflict, the best way is to use disinformation to persuade the people in that nation that you're going after that their government is wrong. Once you've accomplished that goal, they no longer trust their own government, which means they turn on their own government. You don't have to do all that much until you get to that point where you can maybe start usurping parts of the government over.
You'd be bad to say I don't fully trust our government currently.
I don't think anybody does.
Yeah, I don't think the vast majority of the people in this country trust our government for one reason or another. I mean, each their own, but
yeah, I mean,
for me, it's just the basic control aspect.
And so, I guess let's really get into this topic, right? That was going to be the topic today, and we kind of rambled off a little. But the topic of the day was supposed to be about the authoritarian dictatorship that's now going on here in the United States underneath the presidency of Joe Biden.
Now, and we'll use both sides here. So the one side of the argument is he's just doing it to protect everyone, the citizens. That's his rule as president. Rule number one, right, is to protect American citizens. So what do you?
But that's not the role of the federal government. The federal government it was meant to protect from foreign or domestic threats. Okay, mm-hmm. It should have no authority when it comes to personal decisions regarding vaccinations in that scheme, right? The federal government should not be able to come in and mandate what you can and can't do with your body. Yes. And you hear that a lot. It was the funniest thing, right? Was we heard Joe Biden talking about how
federal government's got to save you from all these unvaccinated people, right? At the same time, Kamala Harris came out and said that we have to protect women's choice, and it's their body, their choice, on the same day. So what is it, right? Is it only women get to choose what goes on with their body, quote unquote, and nobody else does? Especially when we skew the line of what a woman is. So now you want to use the term woman while telling everybody else in America that you don't get a choice of what happens with your body, right? You say, oh, well, you not being vaccinated is dangerous to me. But if you had if you were vaccinated, you have nothing to fear from that person that's unvaccinated,
and
right?
That has been scientifically proven that the vaccine does massively reduce your chances of hospitalization and death, right?
And even getting it, right? It reduces the chance of you getting it. And if you do get it, right, it makes the symptoms less severe.
Yes.
So that they're not being hospitalized in the same numbers that somebody that is unvaccinated is, right? So if you're telling me that vaccines work, and then you're telling me, and I'm not saying they don't.
Yeah,
but what I'm saying is, if you're telling me that everybody has to be vaccinated, and then you're saying those that don't have the vaccine are threatening those that do have the vaccine, then what is the point of the vaccine? What is the point?
That's a very confusing message to me that we're trying, and this was, I don't want to quote him directly, but he was basically, we need to protect the vaccinated worker against the unvaccinated.
Oh, and he said that clearly.
Yeah, which is very, why would you say something like that? Like, we, as an unvaccinated population, are a threat to those that are vaccinated. How is that possible?
And I don't know, and I think this is the biggest misstep that the federal government has made so far, right? The most off-putting thing to somebody that doesn't have the vaccine is telling them that they're the threat. Right, because you're not bringing harmony to anybody.
No,
you're not trying to convince them. You've now stated you are enemy number one, and because we're enemy number one, we're coming for you.
Which is just, it's mind-boggling to me. And for me personally, I'm a big, even when this whole thing started, the natural immunity, the data was out there, and you'd have to search to find these reports, right? But those that have recovered of it, it seems like they have a higher protection than even those who had the vaccine. But they're still wanting those who have recovered to get the vaccine. For what purpose? This is not about public health at that point. If it was really about public health, you'd say if you've already recovered from it, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, I think it is the greatest thing that they're doing right now is trying to further divide, right? Because
understand why.
Well, just look at it like this. I mean, this is the way I think of it, right? What is more scary to the federal government than the population standing together in opposition to the government?
They were so
right?
Close.
What is more frightening? And let's be
clear. This didn't all start underneath Joe Biden, right?
No, absolutely not. I've been anti-government for a long time.
Yeah, so we're talking about control. I think the biggest push we would have seen would have been right after 9/11, which for those today, we put out all of our heartfelt emotions for those who lost somebody on the 20th anniversary today.
Like, do you remember where you were when you first heard the news?
Yeah, I was in history class. It was 8th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and they stopped school, and we had to go upstairs, and they turned on the TV, and we were watching it. I mean, it was.
I'm not gonna lie, you hear some of the stories, and I try to put myself into those people's shoes, which is impossible to do. I've never lived through that. But for those that did, that either firsthand witnessed it or had somebody, a loved one or a friend that actually lost someone in such a way, it hits me somewhere where I don't get hit very often. It's hard to fathom the pain that they feel.
Yeah, I mean, for all the first responders and all those that did what they could, that's heroic to the very definition. Honestly, you can't say that there's a lot of people that would have run towards that sort of danger.
Absolutely not. And I can say I would, But unless you're in that position, you don't
You
ever
can't
really
ever know.
Yeah.
Right? You hear a lot of people say that, oh, I would have done that.
Yeah, all the time, man. But you don't really
You'll
know.
never know. I mean,
Yeah.
until it happens.
Until it happens.
You'll never know, right? But I think the point that I was trying to get at was right after 9/11 had happened, we saw this enormous shift in favor of the federal government and the powers that were being administered.
What did they call
which
that?
Was,
what was the name
that
of
was
that?
the Patriot Act.
The Patriot Act. There you
Right,
go.
and the Patriot Act was the most authoritarian thing that we had seen, right? It gave the president almost this unilateral amount of power to declare war,
to kind of move behind the realms of
what's going on.
Everything. And it was all in the name of security, which sounds really, really good, right?
Well,
Doesn't it sound appealing?
Who was it? Benjamin Franklin said, "To those that would sacrifice safety for security deserve neither."
Yes,
Right?
yes. That's absolute truth.
It was never the federal government's job was never to protect me in that kind of way,
No,
right? It was to protect my freedoms, and it was protect from foreign or domestic threats against the nation. But when you turned around and started using the NSA to spy on the American people,
and who was that? Wasn't that
that was
Snowden that really cracked that case wide open?
Who is now living in Russia, right? He is that. To me, he's a hero.
Why?
Right?
Yes.
To me, he's a hero.
Is he?
Because he threatened national security.
It made me really mad that he was not part of it.
Because they found out that we were spying. We were spying on our allies. Right? We used the NSA to spy on American citizens and our allies. And when Snowden outed that, it put us in a very bad spot with our allies. We had a lot of agents that were in the field that were outed at that time, right? And the craziest thing is that Snowden had tried to do everything he could to edit the names when he released all of this information, right? He was doing his best to try to keep this as safe, but still address what was going on. And it was that he was actually scooped from underneath, and someone had taken that story and gone with it first. And he had even tried to talk to the federal government, saying that they were going to release all of this information, and that there was nothing he could do to stop them from not posting all of the names.
Who was president when this happened? I don't even remember.
I think it was
fairly recent. I mean, it was either Obama or Trump.
It would have to have been Obama.
Unless
it wasn't already Bush. It was.
I don't think it was either. So much.
It would have had to have been like 2009, I think.
Maybe.
It's been a while, but I think Snowden was straight up just that's heroic, right? He put his life on the line, and he had to run because the U.S. government was coming after him for doing his job, right? For being in the media, right? For being a journalist, and an investigative journalist, which you don't see anymore.
No.
Right? That's heroic.
Yeah.
Now
journalism is very partisan. It's depending on which news station you watch
somebody writes a story, and then somebody writes on that story, and then they write on that story, and the story gets twisted to the point where it's no longer true.
You're looking at what you want.
Especially when the first story was not true in the first place, right? We saw that story about Oklahoma. Have you seen that story?
Elaborate.
So they were saying that there was all of these massive outbreaks of ivermectin.
Oh yeah. The overdoses of ivermectin or whatever it was.
Gunshot victims.
All of this.
Rural Oklahoma. And they were saying that they couldn't even get into the emergency rooms because they were just full of overdose ivermectin, right? That story was 100% false. There was nothing true in that story at all. But that's what we heard.
Yeah, that wasn't too long ago, was it?
No, this is 5 days ago.
Yeah.
5-6 days ago. And we heard that all across the news. Everybody said it. All of the main channels, right? Your MSNBC, your CNN, they all said the same thing. Oh my gosh, ivermectin, they're using horse medicine.
Yeah, they said the same thing with Joe Rogan.
Poor Joe.
And he came out and he was like, this is what my doctor prescribed. This wasn't...
He said exactly. He had to sue.
That's what he did. He did. That's just what his doctor prescribed. I guess, and I don't know how much validity this has too, but I guess other countries are actively using this as a treatment. Like, I do wonder what it actually does. I didn't use it when I had COVID. I just stayed in the basement and played video games, but I couldn't taste or smell. It wasn't
Real rough.
whatever. But it does impact people. There are people out there that this disease is
Yeah, we're not saying
pretty
it's
bad.
not
Yeah, it's
real.
pretty- which is unfortunate. But it was the strangest disease I think I've ever had in my life. Never have I ever felt anything this odd.
I haven't.
You might have. You
I mean, I might have. I was. There were a couple of days where I was feeling pretty
Yeah,
crappy.
that might be it.
I worked, you know. I did
Or it was
what
a
I had to
cough.
do. And I don't know, man. It is what it is. But I don't.
Unpopular or popular, whatever it may be, the least affected group of all of this COVID happens to be children. What do you think of that concept of COVID? That the children are the ones that are least affected by it?
Which is weird.
It's
Right,
very
it's weird
It
because
doesn't make
normally-
any sense.
Normally, children are very susceptible because they don't have such a pronounced immune system, right?
yes.
So their responses are usually not as adept at fending off these foreign diseases and whatever it goes on inside the body. So to see something where kids under the age of 18, you know, weren't contracting this, and if they did, they were asymptomatic, or it was fairly.
Like, I wonder how many kids actually did get it, and they just didn't know it because it was just like a sniffle.
Well, I mean, that's the problem, is that we don't know, right?
No
The
idea.
CDC just came out and said that they had underestimated their numbers by about half, right?
It's a big
So, I mean, that's huge, right? If you're saying that we had, 100 million people that reported that they had COVID, and you say that there's probably double that, I mean, that's huge, right? We're no longer talking about only 55% people that have been vaccinated in America, right? That
Talking about a
55%.
huge number that have recovered from this
Right, yeah,
disease as
with the
well.
natural immunity, right? So when we were told that herd immunity was at 70%, and then all of a sudden it went to 80 or 90, you know?
It keeps going up.
So if we have to factor in what the CDC is saying, what number are we actually at? What percentage has actually got a good amount of immunity to?
Like, if the government really wanted to find out, they would have antibody tests to determine if a person.
Yeah, but again,
What's the
government has no authority to make these kinds of moves.
No, but if they really wanted, if in the sake of science, they really wanted to figure this stuff out.
Well, they've done some sort of testings like that where they're taking, 3,000 or 4,000 group studies,
And just
and
testing
and
this
seeing,
on a
and seeing
voluntary
like,
basis.
out of these 3,000 people, 70% have got antibodies, right? And then they're trying to disseminate that across the nation and saying, okay, well, if that's the case, then we actually have underestimated.
Which is so frustrating. I think the whole COVID thing has become such a
Political mess.
It is. It's all political. The basis on science, and I hate that term, based on science. Science, whatever it is, what it is. And that's exactly what it's become. It's become if you're a Democrat, you have to get this vaccine. Don't question. But if you're a Republican, don't get the vaccine, which is both of those are just wrong.
Talk to your doctor.
Exactly.
That's the whole point of what
That's
this should be.
exactly
Right?
what
The doctor
this
says,
is.
hey, I think you should take this, right? You're in this category of where the likelihood of you dying from this is more extreme, right? Then your doctor will tell you something like, oh, I think you should get this, or maybe you shouldn't get this because you have X, Y, or Z underlying conditions that would put you in threat of some severe reaction, right? But your doctor should know, right? And they'll tell you.
And that's what neither side is really pushing that.
But, right, and I think the craziest thing about this whole thing is that a pandemic of this nature, right, should have brought unity.
Oh,
Right? It should have unified everybody, right? Everybody should have come together and been like,
crazy.
we have to do everything we can to help our fellow citizens, right? And this should have been a moment where the federal government could have come in and said, we got to do things together. Right? We have to lock arms and we have to fight this together, because it was underneath Trump when this happened. Right? The media was screaming about how terrible the orange man is, right? Terrible, horrible, no good, very bad man.
They were really anti the vaccine when Trump was making it.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the biggest problem that we've seen so far.
Yes.
Is that
I do too. I believe that's part of the biggest reason there's a hesitancy outside. I know they're going to say this is all conservative. The conservatives are the only ones that are anti-vaccine. But what's the largest group out there that has been hesitant to the vaccine? It's minorities. They're the ones that are like, I don't feel like taking this vaccine.
well, yeah,
I mean, conservatives, yes, don't get me wrong, but at the very beginning, the messaging, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, I'm pretty sure Pelosi even came out and said, if Trump's making this vaccine, we're not going to take it. There's not enough testing.
mm-hmm.
And then and I agree with that. I didn't like it when Trump was making it. I'm going to be totally honest. I said this thing's being rushed too fast. They're going to make it.
But it was funny that
it flipped.
the week that Joe Biden was inaugurated,
It came out with that
it was
right.
everybody get vaccinated.
Everybody get vaccinated.
Okay, wait a minute. What happened? A month and a half ago when he said,
No, yeah, don't take it.
we're not going to take this because we don't trust the president.
Yes.
And then we get the Democratic president in office, right, Joe Biden, and it turns into
messaging.
everybody's got to take it, right? Oh no, we totally believe in this thing.
Yes.
Right. It was the messaging that threw people off. Had everybody been on the same page, had the government been on the same page and said, hey, there's nothing wrong with the vaccine, right? And we believe in it, and it works. You would not see the hesitancy that you see now.
I absolutely agree. Because even Trump just came out. I'm not saying he's like super pro-vaccine, but he has come out and says
every time,
get the vaccine, and he gets booed.
He gets booed for it. That's because the messaging was bad.
The message at the very beginning when people first started hearing about it, and people remember that.
Because Republicans were on board for taking the vaccine. They were. They had been on board, right? A lot of them had been on board saying, okay, yeah, when it comes out, we'll take it. But then the messaging changed, and everybody started getting a little hesitant about it.
Because honestly, why would you trust the big pharma at that point? Who are the ones running, and this is what I said at the very beginning, who are the ones running the safety checks and balances for this vaccine?
Well, that's
the manufacturers of the vaccine.
But you also had FDA involved, some of your other government organizations that would...
Yeah, like those guys that stepped down, the heads of the FDA and CDC recently that stepped down.
I try to stay out of
the reasoning as to
these
background
conspiracies.
I know that's what it is too. I never thought I would ever.
But there's a lot of very coincidental things that pop up that just make it seem a little weird, right? And I'm all for it. I mean, if people want to get vaccinated, by all means, that is your personal choice, and you have every right to do so or not to do so.
Yep. I would encourage if you are in a high risk category, it's pretty well
known.
But
we've gone off topic.
We've gone
way off topic. Let's get back to talking about the authoritarianism that is going on here, though.
I forgot
right?
we were on that. You're right.
Oh, jeez.
So we'll back up just a tiny bit. So when Joe Biden came out in his speech, it was a 20-minute speech, and he laid out a 6-part plan to boost his COVID response, right? And one of the 6-part plan was that any employer over 100 employees, employed over 100 employees, was going to mandate vaccines or weekly testing.
Right, and I think
it wasn't through him either. It was through
OSHA, yeah. Right? Which I think is very, very steep move there. I mean, how does OSHA? How would OSHA be able to enforce any of this, right? You would have to grow that organization tenfold.
Well, I guess legally, from what I understand, there was legally it seems like it was okay, but like you said, OSHA's not, where I work, I haven't seen OSHA there more than a handful of times in 8 years.
OSHA typically...
I don't know if I've even seen it once.
I've seen that. So I have 2 jobs, not this job that I'm at now, but the job before, we would have accidents, right? It was not a safe job. There's a lot of guys that would get hurt or get injured, and we would see OSHA. And I think I was there 5 years, and we saw OSHA maybe 7 or 8 times.
So, how would you implement this? And we don't know what their plan is yet. They haven't come out and really specified.
I think the way you see this implemented is that they require any business with over 100 people to submit either
Yes.
vaccination cards or
That's-
to submit tests to OSHA, and then OSHA would have to then come in and verify, right? If they think there's something suspicious, they would have to send somebody out to verify that these tests or these vaccine cards are in order. Anyone that doesn't submit those, right, would automatically get a visit.
There's a huge
And then
fine
you would
on
see,
this
yeah, it's 14,000 per
per incident.
incident, right? So if you
That's
had
huge.
200 employees, 100 of them weren't vaccinated,
It's a
and you didn't
massive-
submit anything,
Yeah.
that's $1.4 million,
Yeah.
right? Every week until they're all vaccinated. Or you fire 100 people,
So
right? If you can't get them to do it, and they don't want to take a test, you have to fire them, right? They-
Fire 101 of them to get down to
in
99.
a time where the
It's
unemployment
true.
rate is out of this world. I mean, you've got 11 million jobs open. Can you afford to push that number by another million?
And that's what they're hoping for. With the cost of everything going on, and let's be honest, inflation's not going anywhere. What they're banking on is people who just simply don't want to lose their jobs, so they're just going to do it. That's what they're hoping on. But if it was really
A matter of public health, which
I think you're going to see some very serious kickback
I do
from
without-
companies,
without
from
question.
organizations, from even just normal average citizens of America. I think you're going to see a lot of these people kick back, and they're going to fight back about this and say, you can't do this.
Yeah, I don't.
Right? The overreach that we have seen at this point in time, this is almost China level, I think.
Oh, this is absolutely.
I mean,
China level.
Joe Biden has said, if I can't do this through the federal government, then I'll use smaller organizations, or I'll just override the Supreme Court. Right? When the CDC was posting the moratorium for evictions,
Yeah, he said.
he said, I'm not allowed to do this. And
Why a little bit
the
more
Supreme
time?
and the Supreme
Yeah.
Court said you can't do this. Right? They said we'll allow this to go the one time, but once this moratorium ends, you can't do it again. And Biden said, you know what? We're going to do it again anyways.
And by the time litigation is done, at least it buys us a little bit more time.
Yeah, which I mean he's snubbing the Supreme Court, right? Which is supposed to be one of the checks and balances. If you can snub the Supreme Court, that means you can snub the legislative, right? Which all that leaves you with is the Fed. And if the Fed has absolute utter control,
No,
what's
please
there
don't let
to
that happen.
stop them from doing whatever it is they want to do?
Yes, like, and the point, the what I try to get across to people is that they're going to tell me, well, this is just a vaccine, right? But it always starts as something very small.
Well, it started with it's just 15 days,
That is true.
and then it was it's just a mask,
It's long. 15
and then it
minutes.
was oh well, it's just 2 masks.
Just social distancing for
It's just
a little
social
bit.
distancing.
But it's not. It's not.
It's
ending.
just a shot.
It's not ending though.
It's just a booster.
And then
It's
what's
just a
next?
booster
Like,
with 2 pills every day.
if this is going to be for public health, what's to stop them from saying we're going to outlaw soda pop? Soda's bad, right?
Like Bloomberg did that. He tried to.
He did in New
He
York.
tried to
Right?
do that in New York. He tried to do that.
So in the name of the greater good,
Right,
this
for
is just the
public
first
safety,
step,
and
and this is a bad precedent to set. That's what I've
No.
argued from the get-go.
I think that's the biggest problem that we're seeing right now.
Yes.
Right? Is if you allow this precedent to be set now, what stops the federal government from a year or 2 from now coming in and saying, well, we're worried about X, Y, or Z, and saying because we're worried about X, Y, or Z, you can no longer do this.
Mhm.
Right, and slowly stripping away the rights. I mean, we've already seen them stripping away rights.
Yep.
Okay, New York City, right, for instance, if you don't have a vaccine card, you can't go into buildings.
Yeah, what's the name of that? They have a name for that.
I
It's
know.
the key to New York City.
Yeah,
Something like that.
yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, that's outrageous, right?
It is.
We've gone back to segregation times, and the craziest thing is that minorities are the ones that are under-vaccinated, which means that you're keeping them out
Mhm.
from being able to go to restaurants and stores, from being able to go to entertainment venues.
Yep.
Right? We have gone back to segregation, right? And that's why they call him Segregation Joe
I didn't know that, but that makes sense.
or Jim Crow Joe.
Yeah.
These are all things that I've heard, right? They're funny, but at the same time, it's not funny,
It's
right?
not funny
It,
at all.
you chuckle about it because it's, that's kind of witty, but at the same time, you're looking at it going, it's kind of true.
Like,
Right.
whenever you think of an Orwellian society, I mean, what's the
Start of a great authoritarian movie, right? You could almost put that speech he gave the other day as the opening, right? This is no longer about your freedom. This is no longer about your choice. This is about the greater good. Like, who determines the greater good? The government. The government will tell you what's the greater good, right?
I think if you listen to his speech really well, right, I think the best part about it was he was saying vaccines work, right? He was saying vaccines work, 100%. And if you're vaccinated, you don't have to fear the unvaccinated. And then turn around within 20 seconds and said,
like, you gotta worry
unvaccinated
about
are going to kill you.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to kill you. But if again, that's what it came back to, right? And it's all about sowing this division.
And what would you call, like, I would call that the politicization of the vaccines.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Of
they're
this
definitely
whole response.
politicizing that, but there's something more something dangerous about this,
Very.
right?
This is where the government will control. If this passes, if this goes through, the government will have control of your personal health on a level that is so very personal.
Well, they're already going into personal banking, right?
I heard about this.
As they were sliding, as Joe Biden was talking about this vaccine mandate business, they were sliding in policies that banks have to report any account over $600 to the IRS. I mean, that's
a lot.
What purpose does that serve? What do you need my bank information for if I've got more than $600 in it, right? If I transfer $500 into my checking or for my savings to my checking, guess what? My checking now has more than $600.
And then don't they get access to all your purchases at that point?
Yeah,
your sales?
My bank has to send that information to the Fed. What do you need my information like that for?
Now, I will. So we're gonna say the opposite. What's the counter argument to that? They're gonna say, well, that's for people to make sure that they're paying their proper taxes, right? That's what they're going to claim.
I almost see it as a way of tracking who's been vaccinated and who's not, right? You kind of follow with me here. Say you go to work, you work your job, right? You're at a company that makes over, that's got more than 200 employees, right? If that company doesn't send the information over to OSHA, right, then they can see that, hey, all of these people are still making money, right? Every time you get paid more than $600. So they're tracking that, right? So they go, okay, well, if this company is not sending information, but all of their people are working because they're all getting paid, we can clearly go in there and say, hey, what's going on? We need more information. And if they find out, right, what's the best way right now? We can say, oh, well, we can penalize you because you didn't get vaccinated. We can penalize you. And again, this is just me spitballing off of something that it could be used for. I don't know what their intent is, what the purpose is behind this.
I don't think the phrase, how far can the government go applies to anything anymore. I think it's been shown the government can go to extremes to track people, to find people. It should scare people, but a lot of people I talk to are just like, well, they're just trying to help us. They're just trying to protect us. The government's trying to protect us from ourselves.
But that's not the job.
That's not the job of the federal government. We elect the federal government to serve us. We should not be serving the federal government, and that's what they're trying to make that. We are going to be completely subservient to the government that we elect, even though the government should be subservient to the people.
Right, we elected them, but that's the whole point of what personal responsibility is supposed to be about, right? Mm-hmm. We make a personal choice every day to drive that vehicle, right? Yes. To go to work in that, right? If you work construction, you understand that there is dangers, right? You do interstate construction work, the likelihood of you getting hit by a car is probably fairly high, right?
It's higher than your average person.
You're on the side of the road with cars doing 70 to 80 miles an hour, right? That's why you wear high vis, so people can see you. But it's your personal responsibility to say, hey, I have to go work this job, or hey, I need to wear this high vis, right? You wear that because it's your responsibility to keep yourself safe. Mm-hmm. It is not the responsibility of that person driving to be like, hey, that guy needs to wear his high vis gear, right?
Stop and
it's
tell
not
him.
His job. He can't stop and say, hey, you got to put this on, right?
I mean, he can, but he doesn't
try. But that's
right.
He can't interfere in that nature. Mm-hmm. But there's a personal responsibility for people
to take care of themselves and to weigh the risk and benefits of what they're doing.
And we're this far into this pandemic. I think this is going to be an endemic. I don't think this ends.
Well, they've already kind of said that it was going to be an endemic, right? They
Yeah,
said this is something that we're going to have to live with.
I say this is going to mutate like the flu, basically, on a year-to-year basis.
Anything that can infect animals you're not going to be able to eradicate that kind of a disease.
They said it could impact cats and dogs. My wife was pretty bummed when she heard that it could, get your cat.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, if your cat or your dog can get it and they can transmit, possibly, I don't know. But if this can get into animal life, how do you stop something like that, right? How do you eradicate a disease like that? It's very difficult. I mean, they haven't been able to eradicate mad cow disease or any of these other ones that go from animal to human, because it's just so unpredictable.
Oh, and it's spread. It's all across the world, right?
Yeah.
So to say that this is simply an unvaccinated problem, well, until the whole world in theory is vaccinated, it's going to continue to be a problem.
But with all these vaccinations, I think we've seen more and more variants, and I don't know if that's because of vaccinations or if it's something else. But we've seen these variants popping up. And how do you stop something like that?
You gotta wonder
when
what that
when the
does
vaccine
is not made for the Delta variant. It was made for just the original.
It's true.
And then the Delta variant popped up, and it's somewhat effective against the Delta variant, but
not perfect. So you get those breakthroughs.
Right? So
the breakthroughs that are happening, you got to wonder if that's eventually going to cause a mutation that is completely. It figured out how to beat the vaccine.
Right,
and it happened in a vaccinated person.
And what happens to the immunity of somebody who's just gotten the original, right? Somebody came down with COVID. What does their immunity result look like?
I know there are studies out there that show. I know one came out of Israel that say it was like 7 times more effective because it had the entire mapping of the virus, not just that one spike protein. The shot just has that one spike protein, so that's what your body knows to attack.
But when you actually contract COVID, you get a lot more information. So it's not just that one protein; it's a plethora.
I'm not a doctor. I don't have that kind of information. I can only read so many studies.
And you gotta even wonder what the studies you are reading. There's a lot of ones out there that are very skewed. If you ever took statistics class, man, you can make numbers say whatever you want as long as you know what buttons to press.
Yeah, I mean I think that's the biggest problem.
That's what I've always been
skeptical with conflicting data, and I just try to figure out. And for the average citizen to try to figure out what's true and what's not true, especially in this day and age where robots are putting together news stories, it's hard to kind of understand what's true and what's not.
What's true and what's not, and depending who you ask, they will tell you what's true and what's not.
Yeah.
It's different. It's different depending who you ask. Like the person that watches Fox News and the person that watches CNN are both going to have truth, but they're both going to be totally different, totally opposite.
But again, that's where it comes to this. What I believe is true, but we don't have the objective truth of what is and what isn't, right? Because then everybody will find something that they believe.
That's true. You've got to be careful.
So I mean, you got to do your own homework, and you've got to try to listen to people that you believe and people that you trust. But in the end, it all falls back on personal responsibility.
It truly does. I think from the very beginning, this whole thing was personal responsibility.
It should have been.
So the government making us do something like that, to inject something in your body, not just a mask you can take off, to actually physically inject something into your blood that's what I am so against. The government should never interfere with your own personal health. Ever.
And where does it stop? Where does it end? Is my biggest concern. If we allow something like this to go on.
Remember, they're saying just this one time, right? But how often is it actually just this one time? It never stops.
We had the flu. We've never done this for the flu, right? And that's more dangerous to kids.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The flu is far more dangerous.
But if we do something like this and we allow this to continue,
They're trying
and
to
be
get a pass
allowed.
through the kids.
Yeah, and I just saw there was a little breaking special off of Twitter. I can't verify if it's actually true or not.
Yes.
But apparently BioNTech and Pfizer were seeking approval from the FDA for children 5 years and up.
So this was like a big shocker, right? So when they were first
Trying to get the full approval, like there was any real doubt they were going to get full approval. Do you really think this, after their emergency and they injected into millions of people, did you really think they were going to come out and be like, actually, we're not going to give it full approval?
No,
And everyone was like, oh, look, now it's approved. And I'm like,
to see them
honestly?
to see them approve this for 5 years and up. I mean, especially when the numbers just aren't there to show that
No, it's
children under the age of 18 are dying from this like that. I mean, that's especially with so little data.
That's what it is. There's
So
just-
little
there's
data
not
behind
enough.
this.
How long does it take normal procedures? There's that Novavax.
It's
for
it's
example.
years. They go
It's
years.
It's still in
Yeah.
the
Years and years of them trying to figure out what the long term causes and effects are. And this one we've done it in 9 months.
record time.
Which I don't think that there's anything wrong with doing it quickly.
No, I don't either.
But there are people that want to know long term cause and studies and effects of what happens. And I think they're within their rights to believe what they want to believe.
To ask questions.
Um,
For goodness sakes, what do we teach
Our children, just because somebody else thinks it's cool doesn't mean we have to, right? If the world is against you, should you always just follow, right?
yeah, we definitely don't want people to just do as they're told, right? You should be able to think freely
Yes.
and make those educated
It's
decisions.
sometimes they're right?
Yeah, I mean, but that's on you, right? You
100%
made that
on you.
decision, right? If I decided to rob a store today, I would have to deal with the consequences because that was my decision.
Well, it depends.
It depends on where you live. You could rob a store right now.
Well, I mean, if I was in San Francisco, I guess if I kept it underneath $1,000, I could probably slide on a misdemeanor, maybe.
I think, isn't that, there's been lots of reports that happening out there. And it's not just out there, don't get me wrong.
No, there's other places where we've decriminalized.
So, like, what does that mean? If we were in those, I know we're breaking off topic.
Way off topic there, but
But if I got robbed in that city, for example, and I was robbed of whatever the number is now, right below that number, would I ever expect to recoup any of that money back?
no,
That person just
no.
be a slap on, they're going to pay.
They don't
a
even
fine you,
they don't even process that.
It's just gone.
They don't even process them because there's too many. There's too much going on. They don't have enough people. It would break the criminal justice system, I think. I mean, there's just no way to prosecute, especially the numbers that you're seeing. And that's what happens when you decriminalize, when you make things lesser charges. I think that we've got enough problems with the criminal justice system as it is. I think there's a lot of people in jail that probably shouldn't be,
No.
right?
I wish Nebraska would change their laws about
drug policies.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's pretty bad.
you've got that libertarian view about it. I think that you can probably get away with legalizing some, and maybe others not so much. But again, it is personal responsibility, right? Everybody should have the right to do what they want to themselves, as long as they don't infringe on my rights.
Like, who am I? Who
Yeah.
am I to tell you how to live your life? I may not like it, but
Yeah, I mean,
it's whatever.
but if you start stealing from me, right, you're now infringing on me and my rights and my property, and that's a problem.
right to
So then you can go after them for that theft, but you shouldn't be able to go after them for that drug use.
Mhm.
I can agree to some extent there, but maybe not 100% because there are some extremely dangerous drugs out there that if somebody's operating a vehicle cause a problem. But then again, you've got alcohol that is legal and maybe it shouldn't be because people drink and drive. And,
Prohibition? I mean, was there a
well, that's the problem is if you once you outlaw something,
that created the mafia,
Only-
right?
it not only created the mafia, but it created an underground business around that, which brought a ton of more horrific crimes.
So on this topic, this is interesting. We bring this topic up to make something illegal creates an underground enterprise.
It's almost
So-
always.
So this, I'm gonna circle back.
Sad.
I'm going to circle back to the vaccine thing. So this mandate is creating a new law, essentially. So it's going to inadvertently create an underground. You're going to suddenly create far more criminals.
Well, it has.
Yes.
You've heard stories coming out of like New York where people were creating new businesses underground in burned out warehouses, serving food and running casinos.
Yeah, to try
Because
to bypass these laws.
People wanted to get out of the house. They wanted to escape. They wanted to have their freedom, and they weren't allowed to. And then you see these little underground companies pop up where, well, it's something to do. It's something to get out of the house. And you know what? Screw it. If we get caught, we get caught. But I got to get out.
So you're creating criminals out of just your average person that would typically never consider breaking the law.
Yeah, and how far does this mandate go, right? How far does it go to the point where do you outlaw people from going to stores? Do you outlaw them from going?
What was that? There's a representative out there that called for mandates to determine if you could travel interstate.
Yeah.
And I just seen it the other day. I should have saved it, but there are elected officials out there that are saying that he didn't go far enough. He should have made it far more extreme.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to go as extreme as what's happening in Australia. What's happening in Australia? Give us a breakdown.
So Australia, they've essentially brought the military in to tell people that they can't. There is no movement, right? They've locked that country down to the most extreme degree I think we've seen any nation do.
It's like
people were only allowed to have like an hour or two outside every other day or every couple of days.
Real close to your house.
You had to notify your local police station that you're going to be out. They've actually got to the point where they are saying that they can now take over your social media accounts, and I mean that is authoritarian, right? That's a route that I think that America could head to, because they're making these kinds of moves.
And they're doing it in the name of public health, right?
In the name of
of the greater good.
They've actually created quarantine facilities.
What would you call that back in like World War II?
I don't know. I don't think
camps.
No.
Summer camps.
Summer camps. Yeah, I think we can agree on summer camps. Summer camps is definitely the way we would go with that. All we do is have fun exercise these little woodcraft. Build birdhouses. You know, the little popsicle sticks. We encourage arts and crafts.
Is there reading?
No social though. No social gatherings, please, because
6 feet. We gotta stay distance.
Mask up, double mask,
Triple.
quadruple.
But remember when
even Fauci came out and said this virus is so small that these masks really.
It was the cloth mask. Let's be clear
Was it
about
the
that.
cloth?
It was
So the
cloth masks.
N95s were still good.
N95s, yes, because that's medical grade.
So
right,
if
even-
everyone had an N95 mask,
Even surgical masks, I think, were more effective
better than the cloth.
at cloth mask. Yeah, I mean the cloth mask. Even if you read on the back of a cloth mask, a lot of them say not 100% effective on COVID.
So at the very beginning, had the messaging been better at the beginning,
Yes, had it been better,
this would have completely changed everything.
and I think if you don't bring Fauci into this, the messaging wouldn't have been so skewed. Dr. Fauci has been
What did he
the
come
most
out?
dishonest and disingenuous person
What
that individual
happened
we've
just
seen.
recently? He came out and he was caught lying about something.
Everything.
The funding to the
To the Wuhan lab.
Yeah, funding to NIH.
So those emails came out. Yeah, and it was a company, the Independence, I believe it was.
and
They
then
were pro.
they're
They were trying
they're
to
left-wing
verify.
media.
Yeah, they were trying to verify that Fauci said was correct, and they actually found just the opposite. So people were shocked when they came out with this. They were like, "What are you doing? You're supposed to be on our side. You're posting something that is clearly against what we view."
And that, I mean, it was something that nobody expected.
Yeah.
And I think that Dr. Fauci should he should resign his post.
He has gone back and forth, and they're gonna say, and I get it, right?
Well, they're going to say he didn't know.
Facts,
He
we
didn't know.
right?
He didn't know.
This is an evolving landscape.
He
Things are always
made a
gonna
comment
change
based upon what he knew, and
at that given time.
in this situation, he just didn't know, you know. But you can't come in to Congress and tell them unequivocally 100% no, this did not happen without knowing. Right? He had to have known at some point in time, especially after he'd been questioned about this repeatedly by Rand Paul. Right? Rand Paul has been coming at him repeatedly, and Fauci had to have gone back and done more research and said, "Oh crap, we did it."
You think he would have, right? It's like Rand Paul knew, and Fauci did his darndest to make Rand Paul look like a fool, and for a long time it worked.
It was cover your eyes
until this report came out, and it's like, oh my goodness, Paul knew what he was talking about. Somehow, some way, I don't know how. I don't know. Won't get into detail. I have no idea. It's all speculation.
Well, Rand Paul is a goat. Let's be honest.
He is different than so many other politicians out there.
His dad
was awesome. I loved him, man.
Great politician. And I typically despise the vast majority of politicians.
I do too, on both sides of the aisle.
Because honestly, let's be honest. A politician should not be a job. It should not be a career, right? It should be something that you do in service of your country
for the love of whatever it is. Yes.
You serve 2 terms and you go home and you do whatever else that you want to do for an actual career. But to be a politician as a career, that was never how our forefathers had intended this to be. If you look at the founding and how the Constitution had worked, all of these founding forefathers, being a politician was a secondary.
Yeah, they all had other
secondary.
jobs.
Secondary career to them. It was not a career. It was a secondary job. It was something they did because they felt as though they had to. Right? There was some devotion that they owed this country.
Okay, so I'll counter that for a minute. Do you think that now it's too, I don't know if there's too many people to govern over it for it to have just a part-time affiliation to it? Do you think there's too much that goes into that job now?
No. If you bring America back to what it was constitutionally supposed to be, I think you decrease the Fed back to what it was supposed to be, right? They control the military powers and keep America safe from foreign and domestic, and I think you let people go back to personal choices. I think you let the states go back to making personal decisions, to govern, by the state.
That's one of the things that I am heartbroken to see is the loss of state rights in all of this. The states themselves are losing the rights to govern
by the Fed
themselves. Yes. This was never supposed to be the federal government dictated. It's the United States of America, right?
Yeah,
the states individually.
It's a conglomeration of states that build the Fed. Right? The Fed has no power without the states.
100%. The states, to me, in my mind, are almost like independent countries.
They are.
That are all part of something larger.
And we use these states to build this federal coalition. And that federal coalition is what keeps all of these states that came together to say, hey, we're going to use one government to provide safety from these threats.
And it's gone now.
I mean, with the creation of the central bank, I think is where you see the greatest demise in America, right? The central banking system is by far the most dangerous proponent we have ever instituted.
Because it's not, and this is something that I was oblivious to. I think the vast majority of people are. It's not actually part of the government.
No, it's a
separate entity, and that's hard for me to wrap my head around. Well, it's the money that we used, right? But it's not actually anything to do with it. Do we elect the people that run the Fed? So it has nothing to do with it. That's what I don't understand.
Well, they also control the currency, right? They can control and manipulate the currency.
The government has to ask the Fed to do things.
Yeah.
Which is strange.
People need to understand this even more, right? I think the biggest problem that I've had with it is that when they increase the debt, that's my money. That's your money, right? The federal government does not make money. They cannot. All they do is take money. They take my money. They take your money. And then they give that money away to other nations, to
the military powers. They give that away to lobbyists.
Oh, don't get me started on
Okay.
lobbyists.
The federal government
Man.
has overstepped its bounds 100-fold by saying, oh, well, we're going to use the central banking system to tax you like this. They're taking your money. That's theft. 100%.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize
And people don't understand that, right? The government, they're
because it is a concept that you're grown up, you're not taught that at all.
Well, in any kind of school,
Mhm.
any kind of school,
No,
you're gonna be taught that.
when people think like, oh, we got all the stimulus money, right? The government gave us
Oh,
money.
yeah,
No,
people
no,
are
no.
stoked
The
about
government
it.
took your money and gave it back to you.
That's
That's
exactly
what
what
they
happened.
did, right? It was nothing else.
That's
The government
exactly
took
what it
your
was.
money,
And then they're like, oh, actually,
they
you
gave it away to a
For
lot of
now.
other people in other nations, and then turned around and said, here, you can have a little bit of that back.
because they did. They gave a lot away to other people.
They gave it away to other nations, other organizations, and then turn around and say, hey, these big corporate companies, they can have some of your money too.
Yeah.
And then turn around and say, hey,
By the
here's
way,
$1,200.
Yeah, here's your little.
Thanks for playing.
But watch next year when prices are through the roof.
Prices are already through the roof.
They are. What was
Biden,
the,
Biden, did you hear what he said? He was like, if you take away beef, pork, chicken, the numbers of inflation don't look all that bad.
oh.
But that's like your major points of purchasing.
That
Oh,
shouldn't-
he also threw fuel in there too, right? He said, oh, if you take out the fuel prices, then inflation isn't actually that bad. Those are all the staples of what America needs,
Yeah,
right?
it's like
The fuel prices
food,
alone
fuel,
Fuel prices alone increase the cost of what you buy in the store every day, right? If that company has to pay more for fuel to transport your goods back and forth, they have to increase the amount that that product is going to cost in storage because it costs them more to ship it in. Everything in an inflationary period starts with increased gas prices. Because that hits across the board to everything that you buy.
especially with there's a huge shortage of drivers still.
Yes.
So many found other work when all the states were shut down last year.
They refused to go. There were states they were refusing to go into. There were states that were saying that if you weren't vaccinated, you couldn't come in. So how are you supposed to truck, goods and food into New York's if they weren't letting anybody into New York? Or you're going to have to go quarantine for 14 days before you can move around. Well, how's a truck driver supposed to go in there and quarantine for 14 days when he's got to deliver goods?
Yeah.
You can't. So why go there?
It's even
You're
now,
wasting my time and my money.
It is so hard to find certain products right now. They have many weeks out yet.
I mean, that's where you're seeing this massive spike for used
Everything.
vehicles. Anything that uses an electronic chip. I mean, there's this massive shortage. You want to buy, a brand new computer for gaming. Good luck. I mean, it's hard
Not
to
only
find.
It's going to take a long time. It's going to cost you so much more than it would have.
Way more than it should have.
Yep.
I mean, and that's all from this gross abuse of the federal powers.
So do you think they're going to send out more stimulus
Check, is that on the agenda eventually?
Well, they're pushing for a $3.7 trillion package right
which
now.
will extend this child tax thing to what,
It's-
2024?
It's even better. It gets even better because in order for them to pass the 3.7, they've already written in saying that after they pass the 3.7, they have to pass another 2 trillion. Right? They're both tied together. There's a 2 trillion.
It's an
And there's a 3.7 trillion.
of money.
But
Nobody
they're-
understands what that is.
They're tied together, and that's the craziest thing. And people don't understand that, right?
They
Our
could
national
use for
GDP
Joey
is, I think, like $5 trillion. I mean, we're spending more than we make.
by far. Has that ever happened?
No, I mean, if you look at, they just suspended the monetary tracker.
What is that?
So there was a site you could go to that would allow you to track how much money was being spent, and they
stopped.
yes, they stopped it because it was just getting out of control. Like they don't want people to see. The last thing you want is them to see. I mean, why else would they hide numbers now, other than to say we can't show the people? Fear for sure.
Then you were over our time
I think that wraps it up.
for today.
Thank you for hanging out with us for this little bit of time, and we'll see you next weekend.
Here on We Appreciate Podcast.
We appreciate podcasts.
Or no, We Appropriate. One of the two.
Even better. It was Rearticulate, but it's okay.
Articulate, there you go.
They all sound pretty good.
I mean, they have the same acronym.
Because you know what they say, if you know, you know.
And if you don't,
Ask someone who does.